Hey, I'm Sophie, 28, and I work as a graphic designer in Chicago. From the outside, it might seem like I've got it all together, a decent job, nice apartment, friends. But that couldn't be further from the truth. My life, especially the family part, has been falling apart for the past year. A while ago, my dad's business went under, and just like that, we were plunged into financial chaos. It came out of nowhere. It's like the rug was pulled from under us, and we never saw it coming. My parents' dad, especially, were devastated. Their lifestyle was shattered overnight. I had to pack up my life in the city and move back to the suburbs to live with them, along with my 22-year-old sister, Emma. Now, my paycheck is the lifeline for the family. It's crazy how fast things flipped. I ended up shouldering most of the bills, paying for groceries, rent, even some of the utilities. It felt like I was drowning in responsibilities. But it wasn't just the bills that were weighing on me. It was everything else, being back in my childhood home after so many years, trying to manage everything on my own while my parents were, well, not exactly stepping up. One night, we were sitting in the living room trying to figure out dinner plans. My mom looked up from her phone and said, "Sophie, honey, you mentioned you wanted to have lasagna tomorrow. Do you still feel like it?" I froze. Lasagna. Right. I remembered saying I wanted that, but it wasn't exactly in the budget. Honestly, Mom, I'm not sure we can afford lasagna right now. The grocery fund's running low. I can't even buy enough veggies for a salad this week. Mom looked at me with that "oh, I didn't know it was that bad" expression. "Couldn't you just manage a little more with the budget?" she asked, almost pleading. Emma chimed in from the corner, arms crossed, with a look that screamed, "I'm done with this." "You know, you really don't give enough for groceries. It's like we're always scraping by," she said. I turned to her, genuinely shocked. "What do you mean?" "I'm literally covering almost everything. My job pays for everything here. How could I possibly give more? I'm already giving $5,000 a month," she scoffed. $5,000 isn't enough anymore. It's just not enough for this house. Emma's tone was dismissive, as if she hadn't been living off my money for the past several months. I couldn't believe it. My blood boiled. "Fine, I'll give $6,000 a month," I shot back. "But if that's still not enough, maybe you should get a job yourself and help with food." Mom jumped in, defending Emma. "It's not easy for Emma to find a job right now," she said. Her voice had that soft, overprotective tone that had always bothered me. "She's been looking, but it's hard." I almost snapped. I knew Emma hadn't been looking. She'd been saying she was, but honestly, she just didn't want to work. One had figured out recently that Mom had been secretly giving Emma part of my money as pocket money. That was the last straw. "Enough," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though my anger was rising. "If things are so hard here, why don't we sell the house and move to Aunt Karen's place? It's out in the country, but maybe we could find work there and things might be easier." Mom's reaction was swift, and she didn't even think twice before shutting me down. "No, I will not go back there. Your aunt's place is tiny, and it's not the same. We're staying here, Sophie. There's no way." I blinked, confused. It made sense to me. Aunt Karen had a small, cozy restaurant, and she was a lot more strict about working for a living. But it wasn't about comfort. It was about surviving. You know, I could also talk to Aunt Karen. Maybe she'd let us work at the restaurant. Free meals, a place to stay. It wouldn't be too bad. "No," Mom said sharply, her eyes narrowing. "I'm not going back to that town. Not after everything that's happened." Emma spoke up again, looking at me as if I were the problem. "You're always talking about leaving, Sophie. Maybe you should just stop complaining and try harder to make this work. We're doing the best we can here." The frustration building inside me was overwhelming. I turned to Dad, looking for some support. "Dad, don't you think Emma should try getting a part-time job? I mean, she's 22. It's not a crime to work part-time to help out." Dad, though, was on Emma's side. "Your sister's doing what she can. She helps around the house," he said. "What does that even mean?" I asked, stunned. "I've never seen her do anything more than take the dishes to the sink after dinner." "And Mom, I found out you've been giving her my money. I'm the one handling the bills and managing everything, and you're letting her live here for free? Spending my money." Suddenly it felt like everything was falling apart. How could they not see what was happening? How could they think it was okay for Emma to do nothing while I did everything? I was furious, but more than that, I was starting to feel resentful. I suggested, "If we're really that broke, maybe we could sell this house and move back to Grandma's place. It's not like we're really attached to this house anymore. Maybe we could have a fresh start. Mom immediately shot that idea down. No, Sophie, I won't go back to that life. I pushed harder. It wouldn't be so bad. Grandma's got her restaurant. We could all work there. It might actually be nice. Again, she refused. No, it hit me then. I was the one trying to fix everything while they were perfectly content, letting me do all the work. Emma wasn't even trying, and Mom and Dad were enabling her. The more I thought about it, the more frustrated I became. I couldn't take it anymore. Something had to change. But what? The days after that night felt like a blur. Every morning, I'd wake up, do the same routine, and leave for work, all while carrying this weight on my shoulders. The tension in the house was unbearable. It was like everyone was ignoring the elephant in the room. Emma spent her days lounging in her room, playing games, scrolling through her phone, and, of course, never lifting a finger to help. I started to dread coming home. Then, a few days later, I noticed something odd. Emma had been gone for hours. At first, I thought she was just out with friends, maybe grabbing a coffee or hanging out. But by the third day, I started to get suspicious. Where was she? She wasn't answering texts or calls. It wasn't like her. Emma was always attached to her phone. One evening, I came back from work later than usual, exhausted. I was heading to my room when I heard my parents talking in the living room. Their voices were lower than normal, like they didn't want anyone to overhear. But I was already standing in the hallway, and something about their tone made me stop. "Can't wait to see the souvenirs from Hawaii," Mom said, her voice full of excitement. "Emma's so lucky. I wish I could get away like that." "Wait, Hawaii? What do you mean, Hawaii?" I blurted, stepping into the room. Both of them froze, clearly not expecting me. "Oh, you're home early," Dad said, trying to cover up his surprise. Yeah. Emma won a trip. You know, one of those sweepstakes. She's in Hawaii right now." I stood there for a moment, completely dumbfounded. Emma? In Hawaii? She hadn't mentioned a thing to me. There was no way she could afford a trip like that, and we were barely scraping by. I tried to keep calm, but I could feel my anger bubbling up. "She's in Hawaii? And you didn't think to mention it to me?" I asked, my voice shaking. "How is that even possible?" "She doesn't have any money." Mom smiled, completely unaware of how upset I was. "Oh, it's no big deal. It's a free trip. She won it. She's been really lucky lately with those things." I just stared at them, trying to process what they were saying. Emma, who hadn't lifted a finger to help out around here, was living it up in Hawaii on some free trip. Meanwhile, I was busting my ass just to keep things together, but I didn't say anything more. I didn't know how. The next day, when I was at work, I got a call that made my blood run cold. It was from my credit card company, asking me to verify some recent charges. I wasn't worried at first. I barely used the thing, but then they told me something that made my heart drop into my stomach. Miss Sophie," the agent said, "there have been some rather large charges on your card in the last 5 days. Over $180,000, actually." My mind raced. That couldn't be right. I hadn't made any big purchases. I didn't even remember using my card in the last week. "How much exactly?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. $185,000 to be exact," the agent replied. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. I didn't need to think twice. I knew exactly who was behind it, Emma. There was no way I'd spent that kind of money. And I was almost certain she had used my card without asking. She was the only one who had access to it when I wasn't home. I wasn't even sure how she'd gotten the number, but I knew it was her. I couldn't just let this slide. Not after everything I'd been through. So I called her. "Emma," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's going on? I just got a call from my credit card company." "You've been using my card without permission. Care to explain?" "Oh, you noticed?" She replied casually, like it was no big deal. "Yeah, I did. But it's not that serious. You know, I had to pay for everything in Hawaii flights, meals, shopping, the whole experience. You wouldn't believe how expensive this place is. I could barely contain my anger. You spent $185,000. How is that not serious?" She laughed. "Relax, Sophie. It wasn't even that much, honestly." The flight and hotel were free, so I had to cover everything else. A few fancy dinners, some shopping, taxis. You can't expect me to pay for all that out of my own pocket, right? My mind was racing. I was so furious I couldn't speak. How could she think this was okay? Emma, this is not how families work. You can't just use someone else's credit card like that. That's theft. She sounded completely unfazed. It's fine, Sophie. It's not like you'll need the card after it expires, right? I just used it because it was about to go to waste. Anyway, I'll leave the bill to you. Thanks for the trip. I was speechless. She didn't even sound sorry. In fact, she sounded pleased with herself. I canceled the card immediately, and then things started to spiral out of control. Emma kept calling, leaving voicemails, sending texts, acting like nothing had happened. I ignored every single one of them. I was done. But when I got home that night, it was like nothing had changed. Mom and Dad were acting like everything was fine. They were acting normal. Like I hadn't just found out that Emma had racked up nearly $200,000 in my credit card. I was done pretending. I couldn't keep doing this. What's going on? I asked them. Why are you acting like everything's okay? Emma used my card without asking. You can't just ignore this. Mom sighed, looking at me with a bit of disappointment in her eyes. Sophie, she's just a kid. You're being too hard on her. I'm being too hard on her? I echoed, incredulous. She stole from me, and you think I'm being too hard? Dad spoke up, trying to sound calm. We'll figure it out, Sophie. It's not the end of the world. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own parents were taking Emma's side. They didn't even seem to care that I was the one who had to clean up after everyone. I wasn't just mad anymore. I was hurt. So hurt that I didn't even know what to do next. That was when I decided to do something drastic. If they wanted to act like this was all my responsibility, then fine. I would make sure they felt the consequences of their actions. The days after that heated exchange were like walking on eggshells. Every morning, I'd get up, go to work, and come home to the same routine. Emma lounging in the living room, Mom cooking dinner, Dad on the couch watching TV. No one really spoke much, at least not to me. It was like they were avoiding confrontation, but I wasn't fooled. I could feel the tension in the air every time I walked through the door. They knew they'd messed up, and deep down, I knew they expected me to just brush it off. But I couldn't. I spent the next few days stewing in my frustration. I wasn't going to just sit back and let Emma walk all over me. I couldn't keep letting my family treat me like this. I'd been their crutch for so long, but now enough was enough. I had to do something. Then, one night, as I was heading out for a quick errand, I noticed something odd. A piece of paper sticking out from under the front door. It was a letter. At first, I thought it might be a bill or something that had been misplaced, but when I bent down to pick it up, I noticed the handwriting on the envelope. It was addressed to me. I froze. No one ever wrote me letters anymore. I opened it slowly, curiosity gnawing at me. Inside was a note, neatly written, Sophie, I know things have been hard, but please don't give up on us. I'm sorry for how everything went down. I've been thinking a lot, and I know I've let you down. You've always been there for me. Maybe I can start making it right. Love. Emma. I stared at the words for a long time, feeling a mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to scream at her for being so insincere, but another part of me was hopeful. I didn't know how to feel. Emma had always been the kind of person who'd say whatever she needed to in order to get out of trouble. But this was different. The letter was too heartfelt, too honest. It wasn't like her at all. Still, I wasn't ready to forgive her just yet. She had crossed a line. A massive one. I wasn't about to pretend like everything was fine just because she'd written a note. But maybe, just maybe, it was a sign she was finally starting to understand how much damage she'd caused. The next day, I woke up early. The house was still quiet when I made my coffee, the sun just beginning to peek through the curtains. I sat at the kitchen table, holding the letter in my hand, lost in thought. I knew I couldn't keep going on like this. Something had to change. I'd been planning my move for a while now, but this letter, this tiny sliver of sincerity from Emma, made me second-guess my next step. I didn't know what was going on in her head, but I couldn't ignore the fact that maybe, just maybe, she was trying to make amends. I wasn't about to wait around forever, though. The thing was, As much as I wanted to believe Emma, I couldn't forget how she'd used me, how she'd stolen from me. And that wasn't something you just forgive overnight. My family wasn't going to change that quickly. It was time for me to take matters into my own hands, once and for all. I spent the next few days preparing. I had a plan. I wasn't just going to confront Emma and my parents. I was going to make sure they understood exactly how much I'd been carrying for them, how I'd been the one to hold everything together while they sat back and let me do it. I'd been the one paying all the bills, managing the house, taking care of their needs, all while they acted like I was some kind of endless money tree. But I wasn't their ATM anymore. I began to clear out my savings. I made a few phone calls. I contacted a real estate agent. I was serious about making this change, about stepping away from everything I'd been holding on to for so long. The house was going to be sold. I didn't care how upset they were. It wasn't my problem anymore. That night, as I sat in my room, I overheard my parents again. This time, their voices were full of guilt. "I don't know what to do, Carol," I heard Dad say. "I feel like we're losing her. Sophie's changed. She's not the same." Mom sighed heavily. "I know. I don't know what to do either. I feel like we're losing her too. But she's been so distant lately. I don't know how to fix it." I listened in silence, my chest tightening. They were right. I had changed. But they hadn't made any effort to stop it. They hadn't tried to fix things. They were still playing the victim, still acting like I was the one who was in the wrong. They had no idea what it felt like to carry the weight of the family, to have everything rest on your shoulders and not get a single word of appreciation. No, they were too caught up in their own problems to notice that I was falling apart. I decided right then that I wasn't going to just leave. I was going to make sure they felt the consequences. If they didn't understand what they'd done to me, maybe this would wake them up. I spent the next day looking for places to live. I found a small apartment on the edge of the city, a place just big enough for me. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I didn't need anything fancy. I just needed a space where I could finally breathe again. When I came home that evening, I could see the unease on my parents' faces. They knew something was off. I could feel the tension, the unspoken questions hanging in the air. But they didn't say anything. Not yet. "Mom, Dad," I said calmly, my voice steady. "I've made a decision." They both turned to look at me. I saw the uncertainty in their eyes. "I'm moving out," I said, my words hanging heavy between us. "I'm done. I can't keep doing this." Mom's face went pale, and Dad's mouth tightened. "What do you mean, Sophie? You can't just leave us." "We need you." I shook my head. "You need to understand I'm not your backup plan anymore. I've given everything, and I've had enough. I'm done." I turned and walked out of the room, leaving them standing there, speechless. I couldn't let myself feel guilty. Not this time. They had taken me for granted for too long, and it was time for me to finally take control of my own life. The next day, I started packing. I wasn't sure what was going to happen next, but for the first time in months, I felt a sense of clarity. I wasn't just getting away from my family. I was moving towards something better, something that was mine, and only mine. But I still hadn't figured out what to do about Emma. I wasn't sure if I could trust her yet. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to. But one thing was for sure, things were about to get a lot more complicated. The next few days were a whirlwind. I was moving forward with my plan to leave, but it wasn't easy. There was a mix of excitement and apprehension swirling inside me. I'd lived in that house for so long, and as much as it felt like a prison, it was also the place I'd called home. But that's exactly it, isn't it? Home, a word that's supposed to represent safety, security, love. Except for me, it had become the opposite. I found myself packing late into the night, the sound of tape being torn and boxes being stacked filling the silence. It was the first time in months that I didn't feel like I was suffocating. I was finally doing something for myself. The thought of living alone, of having my own space, was exhilarating. I didn't need to worry about paying for everyone else's mistakes or dealing with their constant demands. I could finally breathe. But then there was Emma. I had been avoiding her for days, not knowing what to say. She kept texting, calling, even leaving me messages. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. I wasn't ready to talk to her, not after everything. But it didn't stop her. One morning, just as I was packing the last of my things, I got a message that made me stop everything. "Can we talk?" "I need to apologize. It was Emma. And this time, it felt different. Her message wasn't filled with excuses or deflections. There was a rawness to it that made me hesitate. Maybe it was the fact that she was finally acknowledging what had happened, or maybe it was because, deep down, I wanted to believe she could change. But I wasn't sure I was ready to let go of my anger just yet. I thought about it for a while. It was a huge decision. I had every reason to stay mad, to shut her out completely. But a part of me still clung to the hope that maybe she wasn't beyond redemption. Maybe, just maybe, she could realize the gravity of what she'd done. So, I agreed to meet her. I told her to come over in the evening just before I left. I didn't want to be around for too long after. My heart was racing with anticipation and fear. Could I even forgive her? Could I even look at her without remembering what she'd done? When she showed up, she looked different. I barely recognized her. Gone was the careless, self-centered girl who always got away with everything. In her place was someone who seemed almost fragile, unsure of herself. She was standing at the door, nervously tapping her fingers against her phone. "Sophie," she started, her voice quieter than usual. "I'm sorry. I know I've messed up. I've been a terrible sister, and I don't know how to fix it." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to shout at her, to tell her how much pain she had caused me. But another part of me, this tiny, fragile part, wanted to believe that she truly understood what she'd done. "Do you?" I asked, the words coming out in a sharp, trembling breath. "Do you understand how much you hurt me? I've been carrying everything, Emma. I've been paying the bills, managing the house, covering for mom and dad, and you've just been taking everything from me." Her face dropped. She looked like I had slapped her. "I know, I do. I've been stupid. I never realized how much you were doing. I've been blind to it all, and I'm sorry. I can't change what I've done, but I can try to do better." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But after everything, it wasn't that simple. She had taken from me, used me, and then, without a care, spent nearly $200,000 in things that weren't even necessary. She hadn't even apologized for that. Not until now. "What about the credit card?" I pressed. "You used my card without asking. You spent money that wasn't yours. Do you think that's okay?" She flinched at the mention of the credit card, but I saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes. I never meant for things to get that out of hand. I didn't think it would be a big deal at the time. I didn't know what I was doing. I couldn't hold back the sarcasm that slipped out. "You didn't know? Really? You didn't think charging $185,000 in someone else's card was a problem?" "I was selfish. I wasn't thinking clearly," she replied, her voice cracking. "But I swear I'm going to make it right. I'll work hard to pay you back. I'll find a way." I crossed my arms, trying to mask the swirl of emotions inside me. I wanted to scream, but something in her tone made me pause. She seemed different. She seemed genuine. I wasn't sure if I was ready to forgive her yet, but I was willing to give her a chance. "You have to do more than just apologize, Emma," I said. "Words don't mean much when you've hurt someone like this. You're going to have to prove that you're serious about making things right. You're going to have to show me that you can take responsibility for your actions." She nodded, her eyes pleading. "I will, I promise." I didn't know if I believed her completely, but for the first time, I felt like she might actually be trying. Maybe it wasn't too late for her. Maybe there was still a chance for us to rebuild, even if it would take time. We sat there for a while, not speaking. The weight between us was heavy, but at least it felt like we were finally on the same page, like there was a glimmer of hope. Maybe it wasn't all lost. Later that night, I finished packing my things. The next day, I signed the lease for my new apartment. I was finally free. I didn't know if I could ever go back to how things were, or if I should. But one thing was clear: I was no longer going to be the person who carried everything on my own. I wasn't going to be anyone's emotional crutch anymore. As I moved out, my heart was torn. I was leaving behind everything I had ever known, but at the same time, I was finally reclaiming my own life. The air outside felt different, fresher, cleaner. There was something about taking this step that made me feel alive again. But even with all this freedom, there was still Emma. There was still the unfinished business between us. Would she stick to her word? Would she prove that she could change? Only time would tell. I settled into my new apartment a week later, and it felt surreal. I had spent so many years living in that house, carrying the weight of my family's struggles, That being alone for the first time in forever felt like a strange luxury. The quiet was comforting. No more tense silences after work. No more pretending that everything was okay. I was starting fresh. But as much as I relished the silence, a part of me still couldn't shake the guilt. My family wasn't just going to forget about me moving out. They never did. And Emma was still out there, trying to prove she was sorry. But how long could that last? I had no idea. She'd hurt me in ways I couldn't just forget, yet a small part of me hoped she meant it. Maybe I was being naive. I kept telling myself that leaving was the right thing to do. I needed to live for me, to rebuild my own life, free of their expectations, their demands. But still, every time my phone buzzed, I couldn't help but wonder if it was Emma reaching out again. I ignored most of her messages, but one evening, as I sat in my cozy little apartment, sipping coffee and flipping through a magazine, I got a text that made me pause. "Sophie, I need to talk. It's important. Can you come over?" I hesitated. I had my own life now, my own space, and I was finally in control of my time. But I couldn't completely shut Emma out. Not yet. Not after everything. Against my better judgment, I called her back. "What's going on?" There was a long pause on the other end before she spoke. "I've been thinking a lot, Sophie, and I'm ready to pay you back. I know I messed up, but I've been saving up. I'm working 2 jobs now. I'm doing everything I can to make things right." I could hear the sincerity in her voice, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to believe it. "Emma, you've said all this before, but you didn't do anything. You spent all that money, and now you want me to just trust you again? I know, I know. I don't deserve your trust. I've been selfish, I've been irresponsible, but I swear to you, I'm trying to change. I don't want to keep being that person. I want to prove it to you." I closed my eyes, feeling a knot tighten in my chest. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to tell her how much she had hurt me, how every time I tried to trust her, she let me down. But another part of me, the part that remembered the little sister I used to love, felt a pang of hope. Maybe Emma was trying. Maybe this was the turning point. "Okay," I said, exhaling deeply. "I'll come over. But this time, Emma, you better show me that you mean it. No more empty promises." I hung up, not sure whether I was making the right decision. I stood there for a moment, staring out my apartment window at the city below. What was I even doing? Why was I still trying to fix something that seemed irreparable? I had my own life now. Why did I feel so drawn back into that mess? I couldn't answer those questions. But I knew one thing: I wasn't ready to give up on her just yet. When I arrived at my parents' house, it felt strange. The familiar smell of home, too many people, too many memories hit me as soon as I stepped inside. The place hadn't changed at all. Same old couch, same old kitchen, but there was a shift in the air. Things were different now, and I could feel it. Emma was sitting on the couch when I walked in. She stood up immediately, her face full of regret. "Sophie," she said almost breathlessly. "I'm so sorry. I don't even know where to start. I didn't know what to say." Part of me wanted to say, "Don't bother," but I bit my tongue. Instead, I sat down, crossing my arms. I wanted to hear her out. I owed her that much, even if I wasn't sure what I was hoping for. She sat down next to me, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "I've been saving up," she continued. "I'm almost halfway to paying you back the full amount. It's not much, but it's all I can do for now. I just want to make things right." I looked at her, trying to hold back the surge of emotions that threatened to take over. "You think paying me back is going to make up for everything?" I asked, my voice trembling. "No," she said quickly, her eyes welling up with tears. "I don't expect you to forgive me just like that. But I'm trying, Sophie. I know I've hurt you, and I don't expect you to forget it. I want to show you that I can be better." For the first time in a long time, I looked at Emma and saw something different. Not the selfish, entitled little sister I used to know, but someone who was genuinely trying to take responsibility for her actions. Maybe it wasn't enough yet. Maybe it would never be enough to make up for everything. But in that moment, I saw her truly saw her, and I felt something shift inside me. "Okay," I said, my voice softer now. "I'm not saying I forgive you. Not yet. But I'll watch. I'll see if you can stick to your word." She nodded quickly, tears streaming down her face. "I will. I promise I'll do whatever it takes. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if this was the start of something better, or if Emma was just going to disappoint me again. But I had to try. I had to let her try. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of everything between us hanging in the air. Then I heard Mom's voice from the kitchen, calling us to dinner. It was the same old routine, but for once, I wasn't dreading it. As I sat down at the table with my family that night, I felt a strange sense of peace. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control. I wasn't carrying all the burdens anymore. Maybe I'd never fully forgive Emma or my parents for what they'd done, but that was okay. I had to take care of myself first. And maybe, just maybe, there was room for healing after all. It's strange how much can change in such a short time. A few months ago, I would have never imagined that I'd be sitting in this apartment alone, free, and finally feeling like I could breathe. But here I was, in my own space, my own sanctuary, looking back on everything that had happened. I wasn't exactly where I wanted to be yet, but I was getting there. The road ahead was still uncertain, but at least I could see a path forward now. Emma had kept her word, more or less. She'd worked hard to pay me back, little by little. It wasn't an easy road for her, but there were no shortcuts, and I appreciated that. I saw her showing up for herself in ways I hadn't thought possible. She was serious about making amends, not just with me, but with everyone she'd let down. There was something raw about watching her struggle to rebuild her life, and it reminded me of the strength I had to find in myself. There were still days when I would hear from her texts, calls, little check-ins to let me know she was doing okay. Sometimes I'd respond, and sometimes I wouldn't. I didn't owe her anything anymore, but I also knew that healing took time. My heart wasn't a switch that could be flipped just because she was doing better. One night, after a particularly exhausting day at work, I was sitting on my couch, flicking through channels mindlessly, when I got a call from Mom. She never called unless it was important. I didn't know if I was ready for another emotional conversation, but I picked up anyway. "Hey, Sophie," her voice was soft, a little hesitant. "Can we talk for a minute?" I sat up straight, feeling the familiar sense of unease creep up. "Sure, what's going on?" "Your father and I were talking," she began, her tone tinged with uncertainty, "and we just wanted to apologize for everything. We've taken you for granted for so long, and we didn't realize how much you were carrying. We should have done better, and I should have been more supportive." I felt a lump in my throat. I had spent so long being angry at them at their unwillingness to change, to recognize the pressure they were putting on me. But hearing Mom say those words, hearing her admit their mistakes, stirred something inside me, a mixture of relief and disbelief. "I don't expect anything from you, Mom," I said quietly, the words more vulnerable than I intended. "But I appreciate that. I really do." She sighed, almost like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. "I'm so proud of you, Sophie. I just want you to know that." It was a small thing, but it meant everything. For the first time in a long time, I felt like my parents saw me not as a lifeline, but as their daughter, the one they loved, not the one they depended on. After that conversation, something shifted. I wasn't sure if it was because they had finally realized their mistakes, or if it was just the natural course of time, but things were starting to feel different. Emma, too, seemed to be on a path of real change. She had stuck to her promise of paying me back, working hard, saving every penny she could. A few weeks ago, she sent me a message that made my heart swell a little. "I've saved enough to pay you back in full. It's been a long road, but I want you to know that I've done this because I respect you. I won't ever take you for granted again." It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the acknowledgement of the pain she had caused, the realization that actions speak louder than words. She was proving herself not to me, but to herself. That day, I decided to meet her. We went for a walk in the park near my apartment, the same park we used to go to when we were kids. The air was fresh, and the sound of children playing echoed in the distance. It felt like a normal day, a far cry from the chaos that had once defined our relationship. "I'm proud of you, Emma," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "for everything you've done. It's not easy, but you've been working hard." "I see that." She smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I've messed up so much, Sophie. I've hurt you, and I can't undo it. But I'll keep working to prove that I can be better. You don't have to prove anything to me, I said, turning to face her. You've already shown me enough. It's about you now. What you do next is what matters. For the first time, I truly believed her. Not because of the money, not because of her promises, but because I saw the effort behind her words. Emma wasn't the same person she was a year ago. She was growing, learning, becoming someone I could finally respect again. As we walked, the weight of everything that had happened between us seemed to lift, just a little. There was still so much work to do, but I felt a small, quiet hope building inside me. Maybe it was possible to heal these old wounds. Maybe we could find a way back to each other, not as sisters who had been torn apart by selfishness, but as two people who had learned from their mistakes. That evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sun dip below the horizon, I thought about everything that had happened. I had spent so long carrying the weight of my family's problems. But now, it felt like I was finally letting go of some of that weight. I had my own life to live, and for the first time, it felt like I was living it for me. I wasn't carrying the burden of their mistakes anymore. I wasn't being their crutch. I was standing on my own 2 feet, and that was enough. As the city lights flickered on below, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Life wasn't perfect, and it never would be. But maybe, just maybe, I had the power to shape it into something that worked for me. And in that moment, I realized that this was just the beginning. A new chapter was opening, not just for me, but for all of us. Story 2, You Were a Burden Forever. Before interrupting me, my parents sneered. I said, Then die with your favorite son. He left them alone and broke, it turns out. My mother's voice, tinged with icy rage and a feeling of closure, echoes through the doorway. I refrained from arguing. I just walked away after turning around. I walked off their porch and felt the night wind on my face. I feel the weight of years of emotional rejection pressing down on me. I wasn't going to pass out, though. I wouldn't allow them to see my breakdown. Not now. In my own family, I had always been the outsider, the one who was easily forgotten, the person they went to when they had a problem to solve, but the one who was ignored when there was a reason to rejoice. The one person who could do no wrong was my older brother, Louis. Favorite? The endearing tale of achievement, or so they thought. Their world revolved around him all the time. Me? The disappointment was me, one who was never able to live up to their expectations. Finally, it was said out loud. I had been interrupted by my own mother. I arrived to my car, got in, and sat down. Nobody shed a tear. No rage flared. Rather, a peculiar, silent calmness began to creep in. Like, this could have been the finest thing that ever happened to me. I turned on the ignition and took off. I didn't turn around. I didn't know where I was going. I had spent years trying my hardest to get their favor, which was never really possible. I had never stopped to consider what my life may be like without them. However, I had a realization while I was walking through the streets, which I knew by heart. It wasn't a catastrophe. It was a liberation. My parents only became connected with me when it benefited them throughout the years. Do you need assistance paying a past due bill? I received the call. Some repairs around the house are needed. Their guy was me. Do you want someone to listen? While they commended Lewis on all of his accomplishments, I was suddenly welcomed. However, genuine concern and a genuine connection were never provided. I ought to have anticipated it. When my mother's disappointment turned into something more acerbic, it was the first red flag. Disdain. It seemed subtle at first. A mocking voice, a remark about how Louis was accomplishing something important while my life was going nowhere. Then things worsened. I no longer received invitations. Social media would tell me about Louis's birthday celebration, which I was unaware of. Only last week was the last blow delivered. My mother called me after I had just concluded my training shift. She spoke in an extremely pleasant voice, the type she reserved for situations in which she wanted a favor. Hello, my love. In that too soft tone, she started. We only require a minor favor. I was aware of the direction this was taking. She clarified. We're helping Louis with the down payment for a new house. We're a little short, though. Only a few thousand. It would be a great favor for your brother. My hand gripped the phone more tightly. You mean Louis? The six-figure earner who never lends a hand to any of you? She sighed in disappointment, as though I were being irrational. It's not the same. He's got a future. He's becoming settled. He requires consistency. You? You don't have any obligations like that, though. All of a sudden, everything clicked. They weren't only partial to him. They really thought he was worth investing on. I was only the backup, the safety net. When I refused, she revealed who she really was. I hardly had time to finish my statement before she started insulting me, calling me a failure, greedy, and ungrateful. Words that were unavoidable. And now, a week later, she was shouting for me to leave from her front door. And I complied with their request for the first time. I turned to go. I was up the entire night. In that small flat, I laid on my bed. Amidst the strange yet serene calm, eyes were riveted to the ceiling. No more calls, no more coercive entreaties. Unless they required a favor, they would no longer feel invisible. I anticipated feeling numb, broken maybe. However, I sensed something else instead. It's like being weightless. As like I had released a weight I had been carrying for too long. I had made up my mind by dawn. I was completely done, completed at last. First, stop texting. No more waiting for a non-existent version of them. For the first time in my memory, I refused to take their leftovers anymore. I turned my phone off. It was something I had never done before. I was constantly anticipating the next one. Would you please do us a favor? A message? However, it is no longer the case. I diverted my attention to making something that was exclusively mine, a life free of their constraints. Taking care of my finances was the first step. I had been paying money whenever they requested for years, putting my own financial security at risk in order to satisfy them. That was the end of it. For the first time, I planned around my own requirements, reviewed my balances, and determined what I truly had to work with. I put my all into my work and took on more hours because I had goals, not because they asked me to. Real objectives for me only. I also got back in touch with friends I had neglected for too long. Friends, coworkers, individuals who had showed me care and loyalty, but had been cast aside every time my family dragged me back in. I called an old acquaintance named Fred first. "I thought you had vanished from the world, dude." He laughed as he spoke. "Where have you been?" "Managing some family disarray. I'm done with all that now." But I did acknowledge it. He just said good without asking for specifics. It's about time. And that was the start of something new. I spent the following 3 weeks trying to put my life back together. Waiting to be called or included was no longer the focus of my days. I went out more, worked out more frequently, and made plans that weren't continuously derailed by my parents' last-minute emergencies. I felt like I was actually living for the first time in years. That seemed to be the end of it. However, a month later, a call rang on my phone. They had that number. It was my mom, the same mom who had commanded me to go out and shut the door. I gazed at the display. Something was odd. Workplace. I had a gut instinct about what it could be. I let it ring for a few seconds and considered turning it down outright. But something inside me told me that this wasn't another attempt at manipulation. "So," I replied. She spoke in a shaky, unsteady voice, not at all like the cold tone she had previously employed. "Please, Bruce. We truly need your assistance." I said nothing. Then, in the distance, I heard another voice. My dad. His voice was unpolished, unsure, and oddly foreign. He said it was Louis. Bruce. He let us down. We are unsure of what to do. It nearly made me chuckle. Louis. It was, of course. Their joy and pride. The one they trusted with everything. The son they chose instead of me. And now he left them behind. Still, I said nothing. Let the silence drag on. My mother began sobbing. "We gave him everything, Bruce. Every single thing. And he took it all, emptied our accounts, talked us into co-signing a loan, then disappeared. He won't answer. He moved to another state. He's just gone." I blinked. Louis, the golden boy, the one who supposedly could never fail, vanished. And honestly, I couldn't decide if I was shocked or if I'd expected this all along. In hindsight, Louis had always been persuasive, charming in a sneaky kind of way. He understood just how to manipulate things to his profit, allowing others to clean up the repercussions. What I never thought was that my parents would eventually become his victim. My dad cleared his throat, a sound I knew as hesitant. He loathed relying on anybody. especially me. But the strain had plainly destroyed his dignity. Bruce were suffering. We're behind on payments for the home, the vehicle, everything. We might lose it everything. I relaxed slightly, allowing the weight of his revelation rest over me. For so long, they treated me like a spare component, a utility only recognized when needed. And now, after putting me aside, they'd returned begging me to bail them out. The irony was crushing. I inhaled deeply and spoke with an even tone. I'm not going to help you. There was a long delay. Then my mother's voice shattered over the line, fragile and frantic. What? What do you say? This is not possible. Bruce, we're your parents. You were reared by us. I let out a breath. No, Louis was raised by you, Mum. You just tolerated me, and now you expect me to repair the harm he caused? My dad said something to himself. Too delicate to capture. I no longer cared, though. You made a decision. Calm and straightforward, I said. You did it every time. You now have to deal with the consequences since you selected him. My mom started weeping. My dad let out a tirade of irate remarks. I hung up the phone after tuning everything out. I felt something I had never felt before after that. Real release. I prepared myself for shame. For years, they had instilled in me the idea that loyalty included sacrificing oneself. Putting their needs ahead of mine was a requirement of being family. I would have allowed their worry to overwhelm me and caused me to doubt my boundaries if I had ever given in to their pressure. Not this time, though. This time, I just experienced clarity. After shutting off my phone, I reclined in my chair and gazed up at the ceiling. Louis had been pampered and supported all my life, while I struggled to make ends meet with what little they had left over. They never once thought that their beloved son would turn on them, but he had now. I ignored the deluge of voicemails and missed calls from my parents, as well as messages from distant cousins. I hadn't spoken to in years and continued with my day. Every attempt to pull me back in made me feel like I was being irrational. I didn't recognize the number that sent me a message that night. Louis was the one. I'm feeling pleased. You think you're better than this? After staring at it, I grinned. No sorrow, no apology, no accountability. Traditional. Louis. He didn't feel bad about his actions. It was only that I wasn't helping to tidy up after him. In my life, for the first time, I appreciated the strength of inaction. I typed a single word. Yes, and he was blocked. A knock on my door woke me up the next morning. I let out a sigh. I put on a shirt since I already knew who it was. As planned, I went over and opened it. My parents appeared broken as they stood there. They appeared to have aged 10 years in a single night. My mom's eyes were swollen and red. Normally so confident, my father seems disturbed, even scared. I rested my weight on the doorframe. Crossed arms. What are you looking for? My mom attempted to put her hand on my arm. I took a step back. Please, Bruce. We were unaware. We never imagined that Louis would harm us in this way. I laughed without humor. Didn't you think? Really? I said. Do you mean the same Louis who has never had to deal with the consequences of his actions? The person who has always been accustomed to taking advantage of others. My dad's jaw tightened. He whispered that this was not the time for lectures. I gazed at them. So why have you come here? I inquired. Nothing. Simply be silent, since they secretly had no valid justification. Not one that involves me, anyhow. They hadn't arrived to make amends or take responsibility for their involvement in any of this. They had no other options, therefore they were there. I inhaled deeply. I've always hoped that you'll treat me with the same kind of concern that you always shown for him. I shook my head slightly, but now I can see it. I was never really a family. I was only the backup in case of emergency. My mother's eyes filled with tears once more. My father looked away without a word. I took a deep breath and stood up. Return. Take care of it yourself. I'm done. And I shut the door before any of them could answer. I listened to the other viewpoint while remaining still. My mother was crying quietly, and I could hear it. My dad undoubtedly swore at me for finally saying no as he muttered something under his breath. I didn't grab the handle, though. The impulse didn't come to me. Minutes went by. They grew quieter. A automobile door slammed. Then there was quiet. I exhaled. They had vanished. And for the first time in my life, I had really cut them off. Completely for good. And I meant what I said. After making a fresh cup of coffee, I went back to the kitchen and took a seat at the table. A typical morning. I don't feel guilty, no internal argument, just serene. They would work things out. When Louis messed things up, they always did. They could give their extended relatives a call. I twisted the narrative such that I appeared to be the antagonist. They could downsize and sell their home. Perhaps they would at last understand that the golden lad they had devoted their entire lives to had abandoned them. But I was no longer burdened by that. It was the first time in my life. I was free, and I had no intention of returning. The next several days were peculiar, eerily silent. No more calls that are laden with remorse. No desperate texts. No burden weighing me down emotionally. I was expecting remorse to creep in and make me feel really terrible about finally breaking the connection. However, it never appeared. I felt light instead. In years, for the first time, trying to keep their world together wasn't wearing me out. To make money, I wasn't busting my back. In the end, I would give away. I wasn't glued to my phone, fearing yet another request that was actually a demand. I took advantage of the fact that I was at last living for myself. I gave my all to my work because I wanted to, not because I had to. I took advantage of chances and once turned them down. I resumed my workout since I was so emotionally spent. While I was buried beneath it, I dropped something. Issue. I reestablished relationships with people I had previously ignored. Nice faces. Relationships that I was unable to sustain while juggling my parents' never-ending chaos. And I started to consider my future for the first time in my life. Not merely getting through one crisis after another. Then I suddenly received a message. My aunt gave it to me. The older sister of my mother heard what transpired. She wrote, "I understand," she said. "I can see why you did that. You're not incorrect." Startled, I blinked. Regarding my parents' partiality, my extended family had never been involved, had never expressed an opinion, and had always been impartial. Why now? Then, I hesitated before answering. "I appreciate it, but why tell me this?" It was several minutes before she responded. "Because your parents are claiming that you owe them money and that you abandoned them. However, I am aware that's untrue." Something in me stirred as I gazed at her message. Not sadness or rage, only relief. Because at last someone in the family realized what was truly going on, and they didn't hold it against me for leaving. My parents had crafted the narrative to portray me as the unappreciative, unruly one, the perpetual failure who could never measure up to Louis, so I read her words again and allowed them to linger inside of me for years. Despite everything, they continued to adhere to the same worn-out storyline. However, it was collapsing this time. I responded to the message. "What are they telling people exactly?" Her response was prompt. "They claim that despite everything they allegedly did for you, you abandoned them and left them in a difficult situation. That you lack gratitude, are cold, and are self-centered." I chuckled to myself. That was classic them. And do people actually believe that? I typed her answer didn't come as fast. Some do, but not all. Louis burned a lot of bridges. More people are starting to see your parents for who they truly are. That last part hit deeper than I expected. For years, it had felt like I was screaming into a void, trying to convince myself and everyone else that I wasn't the villain in my own family's drama. And now, finally, people were seeing the reality. "Thanks for telling me," I wrote. "But I don't care what they say anymore." And for once in my life, that was completely true. I set my phone down and took a breath. For most of my life, I lived in their shadow. Always the spare, always the one expected to fix everything even after I cut them off. Part of me still waited for guilt to creep in, for that tug of doubt to pull me back. Not this time, though. No more. I had spent my entire existence believing family was supposed to mean something, that you stick around no matter what. But family isn't supposed to feel like a prison. It shouldn't drain you until you're hollow. And that's what they had done. But I wasn't their backup anymore. I wasn't the one they could rely on when everything else fell apart. I wasn't theirs, and that fact was driving them mad. A few days later, they tried again. It started with a message from my mom. "Bruce, please talk to us. We're hurting. We need you. Family helps each other." I disregarded it. Hours later, my dad phoned. I let the voicemail go. Then more text arrived. More frantic attempts to lure me back. Bruce, we could lose the house if we can't obtain some aid. Please. We have no one else. And from my dad? So you think you're above us now that you can just turn your back on your own parents after everything we'd done for you? I stared at the computer and shook my head. I assumed that was all they did for me. Such as? Ignoring me for the most of my childhood while Louis received all the praise and assistance, labeled me a failure, and took advantage of me both financially and emotionally as they centered their universe on their golden boy. It became more apparent the more I gazed at those letters. They didn't apologize for the way they handled me. All they could think about was how much they missed having me around. Forgiveness was not what they sought. They were trying to find a rescue, but they were failing. My dad left me another message when I got up the next morning. His voice was irate, barely holding it together. This is your final opportunity, Bruce. You are done if you do not assist us. We'll let everyone know that you abandoned us to suffer. You'll be by yourself. Do you truly want that? I chuckled. I had already spent the majority of my life alone. As far as they were concerned, anyhow. They believed that cutting me off would cause me pain, but I had already left. Without thinking, I erased the voicemail. That seemed to be the end of it, that they would at last acknowledge the consequences of their own decisions. Another notice from an unknown number showed up 72 hours later. Bruce? It's me. We must talk to each other. Louis. I stared for a long time at the message. He was the last person I expected to hear from of all. I thought about not answering at first, but my curiosity won out. What is it about? His response came very immediately. I did make a mistake. Although I acknowledge my errors, I truly need your help. I gave a quick breath. This was obviously not a sincere apology. This was an effort to make things better. I decided to ignore it. Another text message showed up a few hours later. Do you think you're better than me now, Louis? That you can merely watch our parents suffer from a distance? You are pitiful. The actual Louis was there. I wasn't going to run in to save him the instant he realized. The phony humility vanished. I gave myself a sly smile, gave him a small shake of my head, and blocked his number. I felt lighter than I had in years when I woke up the next morning. No worry, no anticipation of another guilt trip, no weight on my chest. At last, I was free. I had let them determine my worth for far too long. I had tried for years to prove that I was as deserving of respect and affection as Louis. However, the truth was that they had never needed to be validated. I had been sufficient all along. All they could do was not recognize. After 7 days, everything happened suddenly. There was one final message. It came from my mom this time. Bruce, to be honest, I'm at a loss for words. I never thought you would leave us in this manner. We depended on you. Your family is us. But I guess you don't care about it. I carefully read the words, anticipating a response. Anger, grief, and regret. But there was only resolve, nothing else. For years, I longed for an apology that would never be offered in order for them to recognize my value and acknowledge me at last. However, they would never, and everything was okay. I didn't need an apology anymore. I didn't require anything from them anymore. I then composed my last reply. Long ago, you made up your mind. You have no choice but to live with it now. Her number 2 was blocked by me. I never heard from them again after that. Maybe they thought I would come back someday and ask for forgiveness. Perhaps they still thought of me as the helpless, pathetic kid who would stop at nothing to get their favor. However, I was no longer that person. My life thrived without them in the months that followed. My career flourished. For the first time in years, I took a trip. I got back in touch with old acquaintances and formed deep connections, not ones compelled by duty, but ones that were freely chosen and, most importantly, meaningful. For the first time, I felt completely free. Story 2. After my divorce, I was forced to leave my family, but I retaliated and prevailed when my ex's girlfriend started acting inappropriately towards my daughter. The ex now wishes to make things right. I never thought I'd find myself in this predicament. Rachel is my name. I'm 35 years old and seeing my family's second disintegration. After 10 years of marriage, my 38-year-old ex-husband Jeffrey and I got divorced 3 years ago. Cynthia, our 9-year-old daughter, is the joy of our life. I met Jeffrey in college. He was the gregarious business student that everyone knew, and I was a timid English major. Despite being an odd couple, we managed to click. We married and began our lives together after graduating. While I worked towards my goal of becoming a teacher, Jeffrey secured a position with a prominent marketing company. It was a happy first few years. We got a golden dog named Max, purchased a modest home, and spent our weekends exploring nearby hiking routes. Our world changed for the better when Cynthia entered it. Jeffrey was a kind father who was always prepared to make Cynthia laugh with a crazy dance or a story before bed. However, things altered with time. Jeffrey began working long hours at the workplace as his position got increasingly demanding. I frequently felt like a single parent as I balanced teaching and taking care of Cynthia. We became further distant from one another, having fewer chats and less moments together. When I learned that Jeffrey had been talking to a female coworker about our marital issues rather than to me, it was the tipping point. The emotional betrayal was unbearable, even if there was no physical affair. Although we attempted counseling, it was evident that our marriage had reached a breaking point. Even though our divorce was painful, Jeffrey and I decided to put Cynthia's welfare first. We were able to maintain our good relations, even going so far as to continue our Sunday meals with his parents, Pamela, 63, and Nick, 65. I was thankful that, despite the divorce, they continued to treat me like a daughter. We established a neutral ground at Nick and Pamela's residence. We could act like a family again, if only for a few hours, and Cynthia could watch her parents engaging amicably there. Nick would entertain us with tales from his time as a high school football coach, while Pamela would prepare her renowned pot roast. For me, those dinners served as a lifeline and a reminder that marriage isn't the only factor that defines a family. We keep this delicate equilibrium for 3 years. Jeffrey and I were able to plan schedules, go to Cynthia's school functions together, and even spend holidays together. Although it wasn't flawless, it was functioning. Then Jeffrey met 41-year-old Amanda 6 months ago. I was actually pleased for him at first. I believed that Amanda, a divorced mother of 2 adolescents, may be able to relate to our complex family dynamic. Since I believed it would be beneficial for Cynthia to witness her father in a stable relationship, I even urged Jeffrey to invite her to our family meals. However, everything started to go apart as soon as Amanda was involved. Jeffrey began to cancel his appointments with Cynthia, citing work or other obligations as justifications. On evenings when her dad was supposed to be with her, Cynthia would return home feeling sad and tell me that she had seen photos of him and Amanda at restaurants. I made an effort to assume the best of Jeffrey. I hoped he would soon regain his equilibrium since I recalled how energizing new love could be. However, as the weeks stretched into months, Jeffrey's conduct remained unchanged. When Amanda started going to our family gatherings, the true problems began. She was intent on making a claim right away. She would subtly make fun of my teaching career, suggesting that it wasn't as legitimate as her work as a marketing executive. Every time she brought a fancy dessert that eclipsed my plain apple pies, she would criticize my contributions to the meals. Amanda was wearing my old apron, which Pamela had given me on my first Christmas with the family. When I got to Nick and Pamela's house one Sunday, little sunflowers were hand-embroidered on it, my favorite. When I inquired about it, Pamela simply shrugged and replied, "Oh, that apron was just hanging there and Amanda needed one." To my heart, it was like a knife. I observed Amanda enchant Nick and Pamela while giggling at Nick's old jokes and praising Pamela's interior design. They appeared to be infatuated with her, and I felt as though I was being cast aside from a family that I had spent more than 10 years with. Cynthia was having trouble, too. After spending weekends with Jeffrey, she would return home somber and reserved. She would give me tidbits of information when I gently pressed, like Amanda critiquing her artwork, or Jeffrey being preoccupied with his phone while they were together. Promises of excursions that never happen. Last week, things reached a breaking point. Cynthia had been rehearsing for months to perform the lead role in her school play. When I reminded Jeffrey of his commitment to attend, he even noted it on his calendar. But there was nobody in Jeffrey's seat when the curtains opened. As my daughter performed, I kept looking around the audience. Hope flooded her gaze. Each time the entrance to the auditorium opened, her dazzling smile had faded by the play's conclusion. She started crying as I walked backstage to congratulate her. I spotted a message on Jeffrey's social media later that evening after putting Cynthia to bed, who was still sniffling. He and Amanda were wearing fluorescent wristbands and beaming during a performance. They had been present when Cynthia was playing, according to the timestamp. I was enraged. I went up to Jeffrey the next day. I thought he would be sorry and understand the seriousness of his error. Rather, he became defensive. He accused me of attempting to guilt trip him for moving on and of being envious of Amanda. When I made it clear that Cynthia, not myself, was the focus of this, I should quit using our kid as a weapon, he stated with a sneer. I was stunned by what he said. I didn't know this, Jeffrey. The man who had previously spent the entire night working with Cynthia to complete her scientific assignment. The parent who sheds tears at each of her achievements. To exacerbate the situation, I've observed a change in Nick and Pamela's conduct. They used to contact me frequently to see how Cynthia and I were doing and to invite us over for spontaneous dinners. Our conversations at family gatherings have become awkward and formal, and my texts are now frequently ignored. Pamela gave me a frigid answer when I eventually plucked up the nerve to approach her about it. She added, her eyes barely finding me, "We don't want to take sides." Everyone finds the situation challenging, but isn't that the purpose of family? To stand by your side when you most need it? For 13 years, I have been a member of this family. Nick has had pneumonia, which I have nursed him through, been a consistent presence in their lives, and assisted Pamela in organizing surprises on significant anniversaries. All of that doesn't seem to matter anymore. I feel as though I'm losing my family again. Far if the divorce was difficult, it hurts far more to be gradually excluded and subtly replaced in their lives. Even though Jeffrey and I are no longer married, I believed that, for Cynthia's sake, we would always be a family. Amanda seems to be taking my place now. Not only in Cynthia's life, but also in Jeffrey's. I don't know. In order to remind them of our shared past and the love that has always bonded us, I want to fight for my position in our family. However, I also don't want to add to Cynthia's turmoil. She's already having trouble adjusting to all of these changes, so I worry that any disagreement will make things worse for her. In Nick and Pamela's affections, I sometimes question whether I should just back off and let Amanda take my position at those family gatherings. Everyone might find it simpler. However, I turn to face Cynthia and notice the hurt and bewilderment in her eyes, and I am aware that I cannot give up. I'm at a loss for what to do. How am I supposed to handle this new reality? How can I keep Cynthia and myself safe without making things worse? I feel as though I am balancing on a tightrope, and one mistake could bring us all to our knees. A month has passed since my last post, and I wish I could say that things have gotten better. We are grateful to everyone who provided guidance and encouragement. Throughout this turbulent period, your words have been a lifeline. I made the decision to speak with Jeffrey seriously about Cynthia after my previous post. I prepared my remarks for days, determined to steer the discussion away from our personal problems and towards our daughter's welfare. Away from Amanda's prying eyes and the tense atmosphere of Nick and Pamela's house, we met at a neutral coffee shop. Jeffrey was initially defensive, with his jaw fixed and his arms crossed. However, I caught a glimpse of the former Jeffrey, the loving father I knew, as I composedly explained how his behavior was impacting Cynthia. I brought up the promise we made during our divorce, to prioritize Cynthia at all times. I told him how she cried after the play, how she looked for him in crowds, and how her voice sounded sad when she spoke of spending weekends at his house. Jeffrey appeared to pay attention, which relieved me. He promised to do better and expressed regret for missing the play. For a time, things got better. Jeffrey began attending Cynthia's gatherings. He stopped bringing Amanda to family dinners as often. He hadn't called me in months to talk about Cynthia's impending school assignments. I gave in to the hope that we were regaining our footing. But something happened last week that completely rocked my world. Cynthia was crying when she got home from spending the weekend at Jeffrey's house. She finally opened up after hours of gentle prodding. Amanda had apparently been reading Cynthia's diary and searching through her rucksack. I gave Cynthia her diary for her 8th birthday. I recalled telling her that it was a unique space for her emotions and thoughts, a personal area reserved for her. I was furious at the idea of Amanda infringing on that privacy. I called Jeffrey right away to confront him about it. He defended Amanda's actions, which shocked me. She simply wanted to learn more about Cynthia. His tone was dismissive as he spoke. You're exaggerating the situation. We got into a heated argument. Jeffrey claimed that because I couldn't accept that he had moved on, I had turned Cynthia against Amanda. I tried to explain to him that this was about honoring Cynthia's boundaries, not about Amanda or me. However, it was akin to speaking with a brick wall. Pamela called me the following day. Jeffrey had told them about the diary incident, she told me in a chilly voice. However, the story he told them was a far cry from what actually happened. Jeffrey claimed that I had made it up in order to sour relations between him and Amanda. I was taken aback. I could hear the doubt in Pamela's voice as I attempted to explain my position so she would see the reality. Once a second mother to me, this woman now seemed to think of me as an untrustworthy storyteller in my own life. Jeffrey is now threatening to pursue full custody of Cynthia, which is only making the situation worse. He says it would be better for Cynthia to live with him and Amanda full-time, and that I am poisoning her against them. I get panicked just thinking about losing my daughter. I've been recording everything. Every incident with Amanda, every missed visit, all of the talks with Jeffrey. I'm afraid of what this will do to Cynthia, but I'm ready to fight if necessary. The conflict between her parents is already causing her problems. A dispute over custody might be devastating. Pamela and Nick have become even more apart. They've begun to declare they're too busy to accept my invites to hang out with Cynthia. They had never missed Cynthia's piano concert until this week. However, their seats were still vacant this time. As Cynthia looked across the audience for her grandparents' familiar features, her disappointment was evident. I feel like my struggle is a losing one. Amanda is more than glad to replace me, and Jeffrey is intent on removing me from Cynthia's life. Even after the divorce, the family I believed I had is gradually disappearing. It's becoming more difficult every day, but I'm trying to be strong for Cynthia. I tried to keep things regular by supporting her at her football matches, assisting her with her schoolwork, and putting up a brave front. But I'm breaking down on the inside. Cynthia asked me a heartbreaking question last night while I was putting her to bed. "Mom," she murmured in a low voice, "are Grandma and Grandpa no longer in love with us?" I embraced her, telling her that they still loved her, of course, that while adults may experience complex emotions, their love remains unaffected. However, as I said the words, I questioned if I still held them to be true. I'm at a crossroads and don't know what to do next. Should I make another attempt to persuade Jeffrey that his behavior is harming our daughter? Should I begin seeking legal counsel in anticipation of the custody dispute Jeffrey is threatening? Or should my whole attention be on becoming the best mother I can be? To Cynthia, I hope that my stability and affection will be sufficient to get her through this trying period. I feel lost and isolated, seeing the life I created and the family I cherished go away. However, I am aware that I must continue to battle. For Cynthia, if not for myself. She deserves a family that makes her feel safe and cherished, grandparents who show up, and parents who prioritize her. All I want is to know how to do it. The second update. Since my last update, which was 2 months ago, things have gotten worse than I could have ever imagined. I want to sincerely thank everyone who has been supporting me and keeping up with my journey. In these sad times, your words have been a ray of hope. I knew I had to do something tangible to keep Cynthia safe after the journal event. I spoke with a lawyer about the circumstances and Jeffrey's threat to get sole custody. The attorney suggested that I begin obtaining proof of Amanda's improper conduct and Jeffrey's carelessness. I painstakingly recorded each occurrence for weeks. I saved text exchanges in which Jeffrey abruptly canceled arrangements with Cynthia. I documented each instance in which Amanda went beyond her bounds. As advised by my lawyer, I even began recording phone calls with Jeffrey while he was aware of it. Even though it was a mentally and physically taxing procedure, I knew I had to do it for Cynthia's sake. I made every effort to keep Cynthia safe from the mounting stress throughout this period. I assisted her with schoolwork, kept our routines consistent, and made an effort to find joy in the middle of the craziness. However, kids are observant, and I could see the concern in her eyes as well as the way she would wince when the phone rang. Last week, things took an unexpected turn, and she was afraid that her dad was canceling plans once more. I was teaching my 4th grade class on a typical Wednesday afternoon. Cynthia's school called me out of the blue. When the secretary informed me that Cynthia had not arrived for her afternoon sessions, I was devastated. As I hurried to the school, panic struck. Had she been harmed? Was she ill? However, I discovered something that chilled me to the bone when I got there. Cynthia had been taken up from school by Amanda without my consent or knowledge. I gave Jeffrey a call right away. I gripped the phone with trembling hands. He responded nonchalantly, as like nothing was amiss. "Oh," he answered when I insisted on knowing Cynthia's location. "I requested that Amanda come get her. I had a meeting. I was unable to reschedule. I was furious. This was blatantly against our custody arrangement. I reminded Jeffrey that I could only bring Cynthia up from school from here, not Amanda. Jeffrey, however, disregarded my worries, claiming that I was exaggerating and that Amanda was now essentially family. The final straw was that, after hanging up with Jeffrey, I dialed my attorney. We requested an emergency custody hearing in a matter of hours. 3 days after the judge approved it, we appeared in court. When Jeffrey saw me enter with my attorney, he was taken aback. When I gave him all the evidence I'd gathered, missed visits, boundary breaches, and the unapproved school pickup, he wasn't prepared for me to proceed in such a harsh manner. I saw that his face had lost its color. Jeffrey's actions and his choice to allow Amanda to pick up Cynthia without my permission did not impress the court. As Jeffrey attempted to excuse himself by saying he was only attempting to include Amanda into Cynthia's life, she listened calmly. However, the documented facts disproved his assertions. It turned out better than I could have imagined. I now have primary custody of Cynthia after the judge changed our parenting arrangement. In addition to being required to attend parenting programs, Jeffrey's visiting privileges were curtailed. The judge made it apparent that more limitations may be imposed for any subsequent infractions. Although I was relieved by the custody ruling, there has been a lot of impact. Jeffrey is enraged. He has been accusing me of kidnapping his daughter and wrecking his life in furious texts. To gain any tranquility, I had to block his number. On social media, Amanda has portrayed me as a vengeful ex-wife who is unable to move on. She has been talking about how I'm destroying their family while sharing pictures of herself with Jeffrey and Cynthia. I can't help but not answer, to correct the record. But I'm aware that getting involved will just worsen the situation. Nick and Pamela's response has been the most agonizing aspect of this whole situation. After the hearing, they contacted me to chastise me for destroying the family, not to see how Cynthia was doing. I should have done more to try to work things out with Jeffrey and Amanda for Cynthia's sake. According to Pamela, the lady who had held my hand during 18 hours of labor, I was being selfish, according to Nick, who taught me how to replace a tire and always referred to me as his bonus daughter. Their remarks were profound. I made an effort to clarify my position and let them know that this was about defending Cynthia, not about Jeffrey versus me. However, they refused to listen. Pamela told me at the end of the conversation that maybe we should take a little vacation from family dinners. Feeling as though I had lost my parents again, I hung up the phone. Cynthia finds it difficult to take it all in. She misses her dad and grandparents, but she's glad to spend more time with me. She finds it incomprehensible that she can't see them more frequently. And seeing her bewildered makes me sad. I'm making every effort to comfort her and maintain the status quo. However, it's difficult. I'm making an effort to see the bright side. I no longer have to be concerned about Amanda going too far, and Cynthia is protected, but I can't help but feel like I've lost something. Even after the divorce, I still believe I have the family I once had. The spontaneous visits, the shared meals, the feeling of inclusion. Everything is gone. I have self-doubt occasionally. Was I too severe? Should I have done more to try to work things out with Amanda and Jeffrey? Then I recall Cynthia crying. Her privacy was breached. The unfulfilled pledges. I also know that I made the correct decision, but sometimes the weight of it all is too much to bear. I'm taking things day by day for the time being. My main goal is to provide Cynthia with a secure and caring environment. New customs have been established, such as Saturday morning pancake breakfasts and Friday night movie marathons. I'm attempting to provide fresh joy and memories to the vacuum left by Jeffrey and his parents. I have no idea what the future will bring. Does Jeffrey intend to attend the parenting classes? Is it possible that Nick and Pamela will ever comprehend my perspective? Is Cynthia going to survive all of this? There is a great deal of ambiguity and a great deal of unresolved questions. But I am certain of one thing. No matter what, I will continue to stand up for Cynthia's best interests. Now it's just about her. The third update. My last update was 6 months ago, and it seems like forever. Although some of the dust has cleared, our lives' terrain has been permanently altered. I would want to express my gratitude to everyone who has supported and followed my tale. During this trying time, your words have given me strength. There was tension for some time following the custody hearing. At first, Jeffrey claimed he didn't need the parenting programs imposed by the court and refused to attend them. Cynthia said he was too preoccupied with work to attend his first 2 visits. I had no idea how to console Cynthia, who was inconsolable. Then, however, something changed. Perhaps it was the situation's realism setting in, or maybe Cynthia wasn't there. However, Jeffrey began to evolve. To my amazement, he started going to the parenting classes and appeared to be paying attention. He began to make an effort with Cynthia and started arriving on time for his visits. Jeffrey requested me to meet with him around 2 months ago. Months after our altercation, we reconnected at the same coffee shop. Jeffrey was different this time. He was quiet, almost a recluse. He expressed regret for his actions throughout the previous 12 months, acknowledging that his enthusiasm for his new relationship had impaired his ability to make sound fatherly decisions. We discussed our co-parenting relationship and what was best for Cynthia in a lengthy and candid talk. I felt as though I was speaking with the Jeffrey I knew in the past, for the first time in months. For his daughter, the guy would stop at nothing. Regarding Amanda, she is no longer involved. They split up soon after the custody court, Jeffrey disclosed. It seems that she was unable to cope with the altered visiting schedule and the limitations imposed on their communication with Cynthia. Jeffrey said that he had also disregarded warning signs in their relationship because he was too enthralled with the prospect of fresh love to notice how it was impacting Cynthia. Pamela and Nick have gradually begun to change their ways. About 2 months ago, they contacted me and requested to see Cynthia. At first, I hesitated. They were still stung by their previous rejection. Cynthia, however, really missed them. I thus consented to a meeting in a neutral venue. They treated Cynthia with warmth and affection, which relieved me. She informed them about her latest school performance, and they listened intently as she delivered her favorite cookies. Nick and Pamela turned to me as Cynthia was deep in concentration on a book they had brought her. They expressed regret for their actions and acknowledged that they had become so focused on helping Jeffrey that they had forgotten about Cynthia's needs. As she told me how much she missed our spontaneous coffee meetings and Sunday meals, Pamela was crying. Nick called me kiddo and squeezed my hand. I hadn't heard his old moniker from me in months. The conversation was not simple. It was a beginning, but there were tense moments as old hurts surfaced. We decided to go slowly and gradually mend our friendship. Cynthia is currently doing well. She's doing well in school and has begun dancing, something she's always wanted to do. Although she still occasionally laments the changes in our family, she generally appears content and at ease. In this new reality, Jeffrey and I are learning how to co-parent. Although we are friendly, we are not yet friends. At Cynthia's school functions, we can sit together without any problems. Both of us are trying to improve our communication on Cynthia's requirements and availability. For my part, I'm beginning to feel as though I can breathe normally again. The ongoing anxiety and worry over losing Cynthia have lessened. After giving up painting years ago, I've picked it up again. It has evolved into a kind of therapy, a means of processing all that has transpired. Even though I'm taking things extremely cautiously, I've resumed dating. He's a patient, caring man named Michael who recognizes the complexity of my predicament. He doesn't attempt to get more from me than I'm willing to offer, and he respects my connection with Cynthia. In retrospect, I see how nearly I lost myself in this circumstance. I'm glad I didn't back down and spoke up for Cynthia's rights. There were moments when I wanted to quit up because it wasn't easy. However, I'm happy I persisted. I am aware that we still have a long way to go. Rebuilding trust with Nick and Pamela will take time, and co-parenting with Jeffrey will always provide difficulties. However, I feel optimistic about our family's future for the first time in a long time, whatever shape that could take. Story 4, you're running late? No seat for you, my mother said icily. I said, then don't expect a gift. And in front of everyone, I canceled my $2. Oh, MacBook purchase. Can you imagine when I graduated from college 2 years ago? My parents were the only ones who sent me flowers. In addition, I had to buy them dinner with my own money. 2 years later, my younger brother received his diploma. After that, they threw a sumptuous party in a fancy restaurant. They even anticipated that I would assist in paying the bill. After seeing this obvious partiality for years, I made the decision to cut ties with my family. I made the correct decision, some say. Others maintain that family members should support one another at all times. What do you think? Walter is my name. I've worked in the finance industry for 3 years, and I'm currently 27. I used to live with my parents because I thought that family meant unwavering support. However, I realized last year that I would never be enough in their eyes, no matter how hard I worked. Roger received all the plaudits, while my accomplishments went unnoticed. I made the decision that I needed to live my own life apart from those who never showed me genuine appreciation at that point. I was sipping coffee before work on the morning of Roger's graduation when my mother summoned me into the living room. Roger was still asleep upstairs, and my dad was already seated. That night, they told me about his celebration. There was no request. It was a directive. We have a table reserved. Arrive by 6 o'clock. Bring a present. I paused. A party. Did I get one when I graduated? No presents, no party, not even congrats. You're his elder brother, my mother added, sensing my silence. If nothing else, you ought to bring something. Don't bother coming if not. I laughed a little dryly. I understand how things are. I refrained from arguing. After grabbing my keys, I headed to work. However, a strategy was already developing in my head. I would make sure it was a memorable present if it was the most important thing. I gave Roger a brand new MacBook that day, which was about $2,000 in value. I had it brought directly to the gathering, capturing his astonishment when it showed up in front of everyone at 6 o'clock in the evening, at a shorter length. I reached downtown's upscale eatery, the Grand Oak. There were more than 50 people there, including Roger's acquaintances, my parents, coworkers, distant cousins, and even strangers. Except for me, every seat was occupied. My parents came with blank expressions. My mother crossed her arms. You're running late. There is no more room. I looked around and saw a vacant seat close to Roger. How about that one? She looked after me, then back at me. It's already taken. Soon, one of Roger's pals will arrive. I chuckled quietly as I realized that only an hour before, I had no idea that I was supposed to be there. However, they had somehow previously booked a place for someone who arrived after me. Roger's acquaintance is given a seat, I see, despite the fact that they are late. But I don't, I said, having come earlier. My mom had already lost interest, but my dad nodded knowingly, as if it were the most natural thing to do. Her expression was clearly irritated as she crossed her arms. Roger's present is missing. She made a demand. To be honest, you ought to go. You're running late. Furthermore, you failed to bring a gift. Soft murmurs started to spread through the space. He arrived without a present. He is the eldest sibling. He ought to have brought something. No present, but still anticipating food. I heard all the critical muttering. Roger's friends, distant family members who had previously shown little concern for me but now felt justified in criticizing me. I smiled at them, but it was cold and lifeless. My phone vibrated at that very moment. I looked at the screen and noticed that the delivery man from the Apple store had called. Making sure my voice was loud enough for everyone to hear, I responded, "Hi there, I'm delivering a MacBook outside the Grand Oak. Shall I bring it in right away?" I said. "Yes, please do," projecting my voice as the delivery man entered the restaurant and stood next to me. All eyes on us. I inhaled deeply and made sure my voice was loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. "This is your present, Roger, a MacBook." Murmurs broke out throughout the room. Between the package and me, Roger's eyes widened in disbelief, as though he was attempting to take in what he was hearing. "Really?" His voice was a mixture of eagerness and incredulity as he inquired. Whispers of admiration permeated the room. I turned to look at my parents, who were grinning with pride as though they had just accomplished something noteworthy. See? My mother murmured, leaning closer to a relative. I had faith that Walter wouldn't fail. My father nodded in agreement and folded his arms. It appears that we miscalculated him. He's aware of his obligations, after all. I absorbed their contentment, the arrogant relief that I had lived up to their expectations. But I don't think you need it anymore, I said quietly with a slight chuckle. There was a complete silence in the room. Roger stopped, and his smile vanished in an instant. My dad lifted an eyebrow, obviously attempting to make sense of it all, while my mom's face stiffened with confusion. I turned to the delivery man and spoke boldly. I apologize, but I want to cancel the order. The delivery man was taken aback and hesitated for a while, but he soon collected himself and took out his phone to call the business. The earlier murmurs had vanished, and heavy, uncomfortable tension had taken their place, leaving the entire table still. He hung up after a minute and spoke to me in a kind manner. A cancellation has been handled by the store. Within 3 to 5 business days, the remaining amount will be reimbursed, less a 5% fee. It's okay. I nodded briefly to him and said, "Thank you." Before he left the restaurant, he gave a polite no in reply. The room erupted in turmoil as soon as he left. With a loud scrape of his chair on the floor, Roger sprung from his seat. "Have you gone insane? You canceled it, but why?" With his cheeks flushed with rage, my dad slapped his fist down on the table. "Walter, what the devil are you doing? Are you attempting to make this family seem bad?" With a look of surprise and incredulity on her face, my mother gazed at me. "What's the matter with you? What would make you do such a thing?" Roger yelled at me, his face still crimson. "I was aware of it. Didn't you simply want to humiliate me in front of my friends?" The murmurs at the table became more intense. Roger's friends and distant relatives were all staring at me, pointing, whispering, and passing judgment. I listened to every word and every look. I didn't become upset, though. I didn't argue or reply. I said nothing at all. I turned and left the restaurant without saying anything more. I said something as soon as I got to the door. I'm not spending $2,000 in Roger or this family since I wasn't seated at this table. I didn't immediately go home after the party. Rather, I took a car to a coffee shop I knew well, a calm, empty space where I was unknown. I sat down in a quiet place, got an Americano, and relaxed. The air was filled with the pleasant aroma of freshly brewed coffee and mellow background music. My mind was vacant as I gazed blankly at the wooden surface in front of me. Yet memories began to return, gently recreating old images in my memory. When I took first place in a school maths competition as a child, I already knew I wasn't the favorite. "Well done, son," my folks remarked, giving me a brief clap on the shoulder. In high school, however, they hosted a celebration, invited family, and even got Roger a new set of cleats when he won a bronze medal in a district soccer competition. There was no denying the favoritism. On my final tests, I received the highest score possible. When Roger narrowly passed a subject after a retake, they gave him a nice supper and complimented him on his hard work, but no one brought it up. College followed. I never requested money from my parents. To pay for tuition and living expenses, I obtained scholarships and worked 3 jobs. However, once Roger was admitted to college, they paid for all of his tuition, gave him a monthly stipend, and, for convenience, purchased him a second-hand automobile. I have a clear memory of my graduation day. No celebration, no party, not even a simple congratulations. All they did was ask, "Where will you take us then? Going out to eat?" I used the $500 I had saved for dinner money from my part-time work. I told myself it was worth it for family, even if I didn't want to spend it. The supper, however, seemed like any other meal. Even before I received my first paycheck, no one recognized my efforts or accomplishments when I got my first job. My mom said without hesitation, "You'll be paying $2,000 a month for rent and expenses from now on," as my parents invited me into the living room. I was surprised. $2,000. You have a job now. Thus, it is your responsibility to help. This is not some opulent hotel. Roger does not have any income and is still enrolled in school. I am becoming older, as is your father. Work is no longer stable. You must assist in providing for the family. I refrained from arguing. Since I could rent a better apartment for that much, I just announced I'd move out. Following a little conversation, they exchanged glances and reduced it to $1,000. Despite the unfairness, I still felt that living with family was the best option, so I agreed not because I couldn't move out. I kept telling myself that they were still my family, but now that everything has happened, I've come to a harsh but straightforward realization. I will never be valued by them, no matter how hard I try. I'll be treated like an ATM if I stay, constantly available when they need money, but never truly valued. I need to get out of this cycle as quickly as possible. I've already begun making plans to leave. I kept my plans to myself. I didn't wait for approval or ask for permission. I got home at 10 p.m. that evening, later than normal. I just needed some peace and quiet after a hard day. My parents were waiting in the living room when I arrived, anticipating that they would begin to rant over the party incident. Surprisingly, they didn't raise their voices despite my preparation. Rather, they expressed regret. My mother's voice was surprisingly soft. "We ought to have ensured that you had a seat. I apologize." My father gave a nod. His face grew softer. "We are related. We can resolve this. We do not wish for you to feel left out." I sensed my resolve faltering for a second. Perhaps I had been too severe. Maybe it wasn't how they intended to treat me. However, my dad went on just as I relaxed. "Roger was furious because you had to cancel his present. Even though he had been anticipating it, he ultimately received nothing. You may make it up to him in another way, besides the MacBook. The cost of supper tonight was $4,600. Well, consider it even if you just pay half of the $2,300 for a graduation gift." I saw why they had remained up and glanced at them both. They had no real concern for how I felt. All they wanted was money. I couldn't contain my laughter. My tone was solid and steady. "No." My dad scowled, and my mom's face grew icy. "Walter, avoid being self-centered," she warned sternly. "Family members help each other out. It operates that way." "Yes," I said, coolly. However, support is not the same as being used. My father was getting impatient. "In this family, you make the most money. You can't spare a little, are you? Are you aware of the amount of effort we put forth to help you and Roger?" I cut him off. "You weren't on my side. I have long been taking care of myself." The room fell silent as the tension increased. My mother retaliated. "It's you who consistently distances yourself. You never try to get in touch with us. You are incapable of being even remotely charitable to your brother." I kept my eyes fixed on her. "And did you ever show me generosity?" She froze. I stepped closer, my voice calm but sharp. "When I graduated with honors, what did you do? You handed me a cheap bouquet and told me to plan my own celebration. Then you made me pay for dinner." My mom opened her mouth to speak but said nothing. My dad sat in silence, visibly uncomfortable. I let out a bitter chuckle. "And when Roger graduated, you threw a huge party with over 50 guests. Did I have a seat at that table number?" "But his late arriving friends did. I got him a gift too. Yet because I refused to cover the entire dinner, I'm suddenly the selfish one." My dad cleared his throat, trying to rationalize. "We didn't celebrate your graduation because we knew you were independent. You didn't need us to." I scoffed. "You used my independence as an excuse to neglect me. And because Roger never learned to be independent, you kept spoiling him." The impact of my words lingered in the air. My parents had no response. Not because they understood, but because they were at a loss for words. I let out a slow breath. If your apology is just to ask for money, there's nothing more to discuss. With that, I turned and headed to my room, ignoring the voices calling after I was too drained for another argument. One thing was clear: I was leaving this house. I thought that after everything, things would finally calm down, that they would stop making demands. I was mistaken. Just 2 days after Roger's graduation party, they had another request. This time, they wanted me to hand over my car to Roger. "His car's too old, son." My dad said he needs a newer one to apply for jobs and get to work. I paused, forcing myself to remain calm. "Are you serious?" I asked slowly. My mom nodded without hesitation. "You've been working longer than Roger. You can help him out a bit." My dad crossed his arms. "That's right. You're the older brother. It's your responsibility to support him." I laughed, slipped down, not from amusement, but from disbelief. This car I saved for 6 months to buy it, I said with a hint of sarcasm. I budgeted every cent, worked for it, and earned it. Roger, he's never saved for anything, but now he just gets to take this. My dad's tone turned stern, his patience wearing thin. Roger just graduated. He doesn't have money yet. He needs a reliable car to go to interviews and find a good job. You're already earning, just get yourself a new one. I gave a shrug. If he needs a car, he can keep using his old one a bit longer, or start saving like I did. But if you really want him to have mine, you can buy it from me for a moment. My dad's face went pale, then his expression hardened. What did you just say? He slammed his hand on the table, making my mom flinch. You're seriously asking us to pay to help your brother? I didn't waver, meeting his glare head on. If you expect me to help, it should. At least be fair. His face flushed with rage. Fair. You want to talk about fairness with your own brother? I stayed silent, too exhausted to keep going back and forth. My dad shot up from his seat, pointing a finger directly at me. His voice bursting through the room. Get out of my house. The room became quiet. My mom looked startled while Roger, who hadn't spoken a word the whole time, remained immobile. I wasn't surprised. It was like seeing a scene from a play when I already knew the outcome. I took a big breath and nodded. Okay. I walked directly to my room without looking back. This time, I didn't need to dispute. They had made the choice for me. 30 minutes later, I carried 2 luggage downstairs. I packed light-only clothing, a few personal stuff, vital paperwork, nothing that would remind me of this area. I intended to leave behind all evidence of my connection to this house. As I grabbed for the doorknob, my dad's voice resonated behind me. See how you managed to get by without relatives. I stopped not because I was moved by what he said, but rather because I realized something. In their eyes, I looked like this. This family was essential to my happiness and ability to operate. However, they were mistaken. I opened the door, went outside, and closed it behind me without saying a word. I walked to my car, threw my things in the trunk, turned on the ignition, and drove away without turning around, putting an end to that chapter of my life. A week later, in order to temporarily remain while I look for a genuine house, I hired a cheap hotel room. It was simple and modest, yet it belonged to me. No more arguments, no more condemnation. Don't make any more demands. I felt free for the first time in a long time. Then I was fortunate. I searched for 10 days until I located the ideal location. 50N to 2. It's the perfect size. Mine, neither too big nor too tiny. The $500 monthly rent was reasonable. I had enough room to live, work, and above all, be self-sufficient. Life began to feel like mine in the days that followed. No more anxious mornings. No one bothering me in the morning or encroaching on my privacy. I kept all of the money I made. I arranged my life and my flat, centered on my work. Also, for the first time in a long time, calmed down. I relished the small things I had overlooked, read, and watched films. Roger was still without a job 6 months later. I had been accustomed to my quiet existence, living off my parents and not worrying about money, until my mother phoned. She hadn't contacted anybody in 6 months. She spoke more softly. Walter, I miss you. It's been a long time. Is it possible for us to meet? Though astonished, I concurred. She chose a cafe in the city center. As soon as I got there, I saw why Roger and my father were there. Another family gathering about which I had received no warning. My mom grinned like this was a friendly get-together. How was work going? There was a strange feeling. Unless they were in need of anything, they never inquired about my life. I wasn't acting. I looked her in the eye. Simply say it. She sighed after hesitating. Could you give us a $50,000 loan? I arched an eyebrow. And my dad added, Roger's goal is to open a cafe. Although bank loans have hefty interest rates, his plan is excellent. We will repay you if you lend us the money for a year. I looked across at Roger. He made an effort to appear serious, but I could see the excitement in his eyes. I shook my head and laughed a little. Really? He has never had a day of work in his life. But I'm expected to think he can manage a company? My mother's voice became frantic. Roger has grown up. All he needs is a chance. We are related, Roger went on. I'll reimburse you as soon as I turn a profit. Bro, this is my big break. I grinned, but I realized the reality. I would never get my money back if I handed it to them. I gave a head shake. No. My dad's expression hardened. Walter, stop being so self centered. You just consider yourself. Do you feel envious? Worried that he will surpass you in success? I stared at him with a blank expression. Okay, I replied. They responded instantly. My mom's expression brightened. My father's voice grew softer as Roger let out a sigh of relief. Son, you're correct. Family helps each other out, but I wasn't finished. I grinned. I'll give you a $50,000 loan. No enthusiasm. However, you have to sign a loan arrangement with Roger. If you don't pay back within a year, the house will be used as collateral. I take ownership of the house. The cafe was quiet. My mother's jaw dropped. Roger stayed still as my father's eyes grew wide. I continued to smile. Aren't we family? Don't you think Roger will succeed? This shouldn't be a problem then. My dad opened his mouth to say something, but stopped. He hesitated, then spoke. You are unlike any son I have. Although I wasn't shocked, I was no longer impacted by those remarks. That's your decision, I said, getting up and grabbing my coat. Farewell. Nobody made an attempt to stop me. I didn't think they would. I stopped all communication after that day. No messages, calls, or manipulation. I have no regrets as I proceed. I saw my cousin Kathleen a week ago. We kept in touch even though we weren't very close. She shook her head and sighed. Have you been informed about your family's situation? I gave a shrug. Not at all. Tell me. She spoke more softly. They're having trouble. After just 3 months, Roger's cafe fell apart. No clients, significant losses. He needed to sell it. It didn't surprise me that he had never managed anything or made a dime. Failure was unavoidable. Kathleen said, There's more. To pay off his obligations, your parents are selling the house. They are powerless. I sipped some coffee, not satisfied. No regret, just the result of their choice. They placed everything on Roger, and now they face the repercussions. I offered Kathleen a timid grin. I offered them an opportunity. She gave a nod. I stood and gave her a shoulder pat. Tell them. I'm doing okay and won't be returning if they inquire about me. Kathleen knew. Roger sighed, but I knew that many still stole my parents. They thought that just because I made money first, I should help my brothers. To be honest, if it were a true family, I would. One in which parents did not favor one kid while using the other as a bank, but rather treated all of their children equally. A household where assistance was offered out of love rather than duty or shame. Story 5. In Los Angeles, during my cousin's wedding, on the seating map, I noticed that my name had been changed to +1 optional. She grinned. I hope standing doesn't bother you. 3 payments were vanished by the time dessert was presented. The true surprise, however, came in their email. The female at the check-in desk glanced at the list, and I should have realized something was wrong as soon as I entered the reception area. Last name? She inquired. Miller. Jordan. Miller? I said, grabbing the card already. She glanced down the sheet, then stopped, clearly uneasy. +1 optional is what you are listed as. As if hoping I wouldn't see it clearly, she flipped the card in my direction, but I did. 1 optional table standing in addition to the name. I blinked. Please pardon me. Then I heard it. That voice was piercing, phony, charming, and blatantly arrogant. Oh, Rhea, don't be so emotional. Behind me, my cousin, the bride, showed there all glitz and snobber. You never sent a +1 RSVP. I thus assumed that standing room would be okay. The bar is always there. Before I could reply, her expensive heels clicked like punctuation on a joke and she left chuckling. I remained still for a moment. In fact, I considered the possibility that I deserved this. Since this wasn't new, perhaps I had allowed them to treat me in this manner for too long. This was only the most recent of several barbs. They have consistently reminded me that I was only a member of the family and not truly a part of it. Disposable yet useful. For example, I always said yes when Rhea asked me to watch her brother Matt for his flight in a tux, or when I realized I was still paying for the family Spotify account because we didn't want to lose the playlists, even though he had promised to pay me back after the wedding. The trustworthy one, the steady one. That person who never fussed. However, they made a mistake tonight. The incorrect individual was humiliated by them. I inhaled deeply, went to the bar, and placed an order for the priciest scotch they had. Nice. The barman noticed the card in my hand but poured it without saying anything. Standing. His lips quirked as he questioned. Apparently, flatly, I replied. I took a drink. After that, I took out my phone and launched the banking app. There were still 3 regular payments due. Ria will get $850. Wedding costs? To Matt Tuck's travel, $300. The family entertainment bundle costs $75. I tapped cancel, cancel, cancel one by one. I then opened my email and included the receipts as an attachment. The ones that demonstrated the money wasn't spent on what they said had been forgotten. Each person had a single attachment, a silent truth bomb on the internet. And when the cake was presented, Ria reveled in the cheers I had sent her. I muttered to myself as I lifted my glass across the room to her. I hope your marriage is more genuine than the cost of your wedding. She didn't hear me, but I can assure you that 3 phones lighted up at that very instant, and none of them belonged to me. Jordan, you've always been the quiet one, the relative from the backdrop. You are therefore easily forgotten. I had heard Ria say it during a family cookout. It stuck with me as I grew older, even though Mom laughed when she said it as a praise. Unlike her, I wasn't ostentatious. When I graduated from college, I didn't have my face featured in the family newsletter or have birthday celebrations with pony rides. I didn't plead for cash. I never begged for anything, worked my way through school, and started my own freelance consulting firm from scratch. That meant I was helpful, and they adored that. It wasn't until I went back and noticed the pattern that I realized it completely. How there was always a financial favor associated with every family gathering. The caterer neglected to provide wine for Ria's engagement meal, so I paid for it. Matt's bachelor celebration. They neglected to reserve a hotel. Last year for Christmas, I reserved 4 rooms. Everyone in the family forgot. They requested me to Venmo again after I had already paid for half of the Airbnb. I did this because, at the time, I still thought that I would ultimately be seated at the table if I was generous. However, I was always the extra, the +1 optional, regardless of how much I contributed. I didn't start to wake up until 6 months before to the wedding. It began modestly. Ria's phone call at 9:37 p.m. on a Tuesday. I'm sorry to say that, but I don't have the $850 needed for the florist deposit. I've already assured them that you would have it back following the wedding. It was obviously not a question. Like I was her overdraft protection. She had already assumed that the transaction would be successful. Before I could stop myself, I sent the money. I got a text from Matt 2 weeks later. Would it be possible for you to assist me with the tux, man? In Vegas, I misplaced my wallet and my credit score plummeted by $300. Lost. Thank you, but no. No follow-up. I then came upon a post on Ria's Instagram a month later. My Vera Wang gown's final fit. Well worth the money, each and every dime. The nausea struck at that moment. I looked through her page and saw pictures of smoothies, spa days, breakfasts, fancy bags, and $19. Those had been paid for using my money. Not emergencies, not florist deposits, luxury, indulgence, falsehoods. Then I ought to have interrupted it. However, I didn't. I convinced myself that I was being petty and that the battle wasn't worth it. You were aiding your family. The problem with being exploited, though, is that you don't realize how deep it goes until it's too late. I received a group text message the week before the wedding. Hello, everyone. A brief update. There is a tight seating chart. Casual vibes might be necessary for some people. I take it that we're all family casual float? However, I discovered that I was the only person without a seat when I got to the venue and saw that +1 optional card. Matt's had seats too. Ria smirked at me across the reception when I glanced at her, decked out in white lace and feigned humility. I hope standing doesn't bother you. No sense. Something inside of me exploded at that moment. They remembered me. I was erased. I was inconvenient, not because they didn't care, because I was no longer useful to their portrayal of the ideal life. However, after I sent those receipts and shut down my phone for the evening, the real slap came later. There was chaos when I woke up the following morning. My email had blown up. The matter is urgent. What is this topic? I've had enough of you. Subject. Are you crazy? From her planner, from Matt, and from Rhea. The venue's finance team apparently flagged the files I sent. Due to questionable outside contributions, the same team is now refusing to process Ray's outstanding wedding reimbursements. They were filed under gifted sponsorships by her. However, my receipts indicated a direct payment rather than a donation. Fraud in translation. Her dream of a tax write-off abruptly became a serious audit risk. Matts took out a loan from Tuck. I would add the receipt to his app for gambling. Top-up history. A neat little overlap. The Spotify plan. That was petty. I just changed the password to Gryffindor. Will it? 123. But the cherry on top. Grandma. Sweet, sharp-tongued, razor-eyed grandma who never said much but always knew everything. She forwarded me the family email thread Rhea had accidentally keyed her on. And that thread. Oh, it was gold. Jordan's a beta. I'm not worried. He always caves. He'll probably Venmo more if we guilt trip him. He's the responsible one. If he makes noise at the wedding, just smile and cut his mic. I didn't know what hurt more, being called a beta or realizing they had rehearsed how to silence me, but that was fine because now I wasn't going to make noise. I was going to make a crater. You're a selfish, bitter child, Leah screamed. I smiled calmly, opened the projector and said, then let's talk about receipts. The family dinner was scheduled for Sunday at 7 p.m. Subject line in the group chat. Emergency family gathering. Jordan needs to explain himself. Oh, I'd explain. Just not the way they were expecting. I arrived right on time. Not early, not late. With a laptop bag over my shoulder and my expression locked in neutral. The house was already crowded. Rhea, of course, was keeping court on the sofa like a queen preparing to pronounce an execution. My folks sat on each side of her. Matt leaned on the counter, arms crossed, staring like I just criticized his hairstyle. I didn't sit. I came in, laid the laptop on the coffee table, and began connecting it to the living room TV. No one spoke. They were too astonished to figure out what I was doing. What is this? Rhea inquired, her voice dripping with hate. Did you bring slides to your own trial? Something like that, I said. Just felt we should all see the same truth before we start yelling. Slide 1, wedding costs. The florist claims $850, but the reality is different. Not exactly. To send directly to Rhea, I retrieved the bank statement. A picture from her personal Instagram was next to it. The same day, the same quantity, carrying a brand new Gucci handbag. Caption, a little self-care for the bride. Matt muttered an expletive. Second slide. Matt's tux deposit has vanished. That exigency of $300? False as well. A DraftKings comment caught my attention. That same evening, $300 was added to his gaming app. In fact, he had written about it in the group chat for fantasy football. A rookie error. I was hacked? Matt snarled. No, I responded coolly. It was sent to the incorrect thread. Do you recall the time you called me ATM, Jordan? Dead quiet. The third slide. Subscriptions for families. Record devices. Netflix. iCloud for Spotify. Family leeches occupied all 5 seats. The profile of Rhea, Queen Rhea's final performance. Thank you. Next. Matt's past. Podcasts and playlists regarding cryptocurrency scams, and the last slide are mostly found at gyms. An image of the discussion in the family group. Jordan is a beta. He's not going to do anything. Simply explain that it's for the wedding. He folds every time. My mom let out a gasp. My dad squinted at the television as he leaned forward. Where did you purchase that? Rhea lost her temper. I said, it doesn't matter. You stated it. You meant it. This is crazy, she yelled. Do you believe this demonstrates anything? For a few bucks, you're wrecking this family. I shut down the laptop. You wrecked it, Rhea. You determined that I was only worth anything when I was helpful. You grinned the moment you put me on a card that read +1 optional. You're ridiculous, Matt sneered. We had already assisted one another. Significant. Assist. I said it again. Do you think that's what this is? Taking advantage of someone till they lose it. When they ultimately refuse, You call them weak. Dad got to his feet. That's sufficient. This is not how you talk to your family. I'm not. With a heartbeat, I said, I'm talking to the guys who made me a backup wallet. Ria's voice rose as she replied, You've lost it. You believe you can punish us just because you have money now? Jordan, you're behaving resentfully and like a child. I grinned. I'm a man with receipts, that's what. In addition, I took out my phone to discuss receipts. I responded, I see your tax consultant and your venue accountant on that email, Ria. It turns out that it is tax deception to classify direct payments as given sponsorships. Your location. Your refund request has already been put on hold. Her mouth fell open. You wouldn't. I did it already. Matt gulped down his drink. You've lost all sense of perspective, Mom muttered. How could you harm your sister in this way? She got married here. That's right, I said. A marriage based on deception and unrepaid favors. My father gave me a scowl. You are no longer welcome in this family. I looked at him calmly and steadily. The night you supported Ria and allowed her to make fun of me, you made that very evident. Up until today, I simply didn't believe it. I swung my purse over my shoulder after picking it up. Oh, and you should check your DraftKings account, Matt. It appears to have been reported for suspicious activities. Ria got up, hands trembling. You just wrecked this family, and I hope you realize that. No, I said, I'm just at last not going to let you to continue ruining me. I left after saying that. No yelling, no dramatic door slamming. The sound of 4 individuals being compelled to face one another without a scapegoat to blame. The message said, check out your cousin's TikTok. It's about you and it's going viral. I assumed that was all when I left that evening. Curtains closed during the last act. I was mistaken. The text began before I had even arrived home. Ria, Matt, you'll come to regret this. I hope we never see each other again. Please return, Mom. That's not how we meant it. I disregarded them all. In years, for the first time, I had a sense of near liberation. After returning home, I made myself a drink and sat quietly. No phony smiles, no subscription fees, no wedding drama. Only me. The days that followed were calm. Unusual silence. I thought they were recovering, licking their wounds, and maybe preparing a fresh guilt trip. Then the video appeared. The time was Tuesday morning. I received an SMS from my former college flatmate when I was brushing my teeth. Hey, bro. I froze open the app. You should view your cousin's TikTok as soon as possible. Ria was recording herself with mellow music playing in the background while wearing a lot of makeup and fake tears. My wedding was ruined by my cousin. He was constantly envious of me. The venue is now contemplating legal action after he provided them phony receipts. He poses a threat. To help people understand what family betrayal looks like, kindly share this. I gazed at the display. More than 600,000 people saw the video. The remarks were crazy. He has a narcissistic streak. I hope he gets devoured by karma. She is worthy of better. Remain resilient. Queen. I felt like screaming. Instead, I saw it when I scrolled down. A comment was made by a Brian left too. She cheated. I've got the evidence. Don't trust anything she says. My blood became icy. Brian. Her spouse. I selected the profile. It was authentic. What about his upcoming video? Even more startling. Hello, Ria's husband is me. Until last week, that is. The messages are visible to me. I am aware of her true identity. She is also deceiving you. He boasted about how Ria would play victim if Jordan tried anything by sharing screenshots and texts she had sent to friends. She claimed she couldn't afford the hotel bill he showed, which included charges for 2 spot packages during the bachelorette weekend. He even posted a voicemail in which Ria said, "Grandma's inheritance is mine once Jordan leaves." Then he revealed the secret. For 6 months, she has been embezzling money from Grandma's accounts, and on one of the withdrawal slips, she falsified Jordan's name. I almost dropped my phone. There was more to this than family drama. This was illegal. All of a sudden, it made sense. Why had Ria worked so hard to make me appear unstable, isolate me, and humiliate me? Before I realized what she was truly doing, she needed me out of the picture. I immediately called my attorney. Send me all of his words. She's in big trouble if this is accurate. That was the beginning of it. Grandma's nurse provided us with bank records by the end of the week that revealed mysterious withdrawals. Analysis of the handwriting demonstrates that the signature was not mine. Grandma self-wrote that she had felt under pressure from Ria, but didn't want to start a fight. Everything was falling apart. Under the headline, Brides Accused of Embezzling from Elderly Grandmother, the girl who called me optional was now on the local news front page. Family Feud goes public? Matt deleted his Instagram account. My parents went silent. The group chat dead. But the biggest twist. Grandma called me. Not her assistant, not a text. Her directly. She said I always knew she was greedy, but I didn't know she was this cruel. Thank you for exposing it in Jordan. I brace myself. I've updated the will. It's yours now. Everything. Do with it what I should have done years ago. Protect the family from people like her. I sat there stunned. Not because of the money, but because for the first time in my life, someone in this family believed me, stood with me, trusted me. It's strange how silence feels when you've spent your life surrounded by noise. The chaos of constant demands, the guilt trips disguised as family tradition, the whispers behind your back that you hear just loud enough to know they were meant for you. And then one day it's all gone. Not because they stopped, but because you went away. It's been 2 months since the wedding. 2 months since I stood in my parents' living room and ultimately told them the truth. Not the version they wanted, but the one I'd swallowed for years. The one that tasted like ash and sounded like receipts. Ray's TikTok career crumbled. The venue filed a complaint with the IRS for fraudulent sponsorship and evolved into a full audit. Her wedding planner dropped her as a customer. One of the sellers even blogged about her publicly stating, "Let this be a warning. Not all brides are victims. Matt hasn't been online in weeks. Word is he's been lying low since the draft." King's Inquiry highlighted his account. Something concerning strange transfers from a joint family bank card, which was never supposed to exist. My folks, yes, they have also become silent. But not the serenity that comes from tranquility. No, this quiet is calculated, protective, and weighty. Last week, my father left me a voicemail. "Jordan, we didn't raise you like this. This family is humiliated by you. There are repercussions for your actions. I didn't remove it." He won't ever use that voice with me again, so I kept it. The one that claims you have a debt to us. The one that was once effective. No more. I've left the previous flat. I purchased an oceanfront property. Light-filled, modest, and entirely mine. The lease has no other names on it. No plants from the family. Nothing was shared. Every auto payment that had ever been associated with me was canceled. There is no Ria on Spotify. In order to avoid using me, Netflix changed the password, 123, Amazon Prime for my father. With the joy of a man cutting the final rope on a sinking ship, I contacted customer care and had my card taken away. Then, an unforeseen event occurred. People began contacting me, but not the ones I had assumed. Neither Matt nor Ria was pleading for pardon. My folks weren't suddenly enlightened. I hardly recalled the people. Those who are marginalized in family activities, distant relatives, pals from high school. Even Ria's now ex-husband Brian, the day after he filed for divorce, he sent me a message. I wanted to express my gratitude. The only person who ever spoke the truth was you. She spent 2 years lying to me. I had the guts to leave after seeing your receipts. He included a picture. Underneath it were the divorce papers. Signed. One more message. She is making an effort to restore her reputation, but no one is paying attention. I received a surprise letter in the mail later that week. I hadn't seen a gentle, handwritten cursive in years. I wanted to let you know that I never missed you, Grandma Jordan. You remained the only one who paid attention when it counted, despite their attempts to drown you in noise. The will was altered by me. Now it's yours. Use it for things I couldn't. Build something better with it. Something tangible. I spent a lot of time looking at the letter. But I'll tell you what, it's not because of the money. His life is changed by the security it provides. But I always noticed you because of the statement. It broke something inside of me. It also did some healing, because I've been living like a ghost in my own family for years. Keep quiet. Easy to use. Not important. The man who never appeared in the pictures yet paid and smiled pleasantly, but managing to hold the camera at all times. I no longer have anything for someone who wouldn't reciprocate my kindness. I took a stroll on the beach close to my new residence last weekend. Only me. Coffee in the sea, no requests, no ringing phone. Just tranquility. I didn't receive retribution. I just made the decision to prioritize myself. You look like someone who just got out of a long battle, commented a woman walking by with her dog, who smiled at me. I chuckled. A close-knit family get-together. She smiled and continued to move. As I stood there with the sun warming my cheeks and the tide coming in and going out, I saw that this was the life I had created, not passed down, not talented, constructed. And one day I might share it with someone who doesn't think I'm optional, but I'm okay for now. Because I once thought that family was inviolable and sacrosanct, that you stand by them no matter what. I know better now. Who shares your blood is not your family. When you proclaim, "I'm done," your family applauds. They describe me as too theatrical, petulant, and spiteful. Permit them, because they will hear one thing when they reach out again. The most considerate thing I've ever done for them is to inform them that this number is no longer in use.